Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Denver, Colorado, it's time for Franchise Bible Coach Radio. Now, here are your hosts.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Franchise Bible Coach Radio with Rick and Rob. I'm Rob Ganley, your host. Before we get started introducing our guest today, we have a very interesting guest. I wanted to thank our sponsor, Entrepreneur Magazine, for their support of the book, Franchise Bible, which the newest edition is coming out here shortly, so stay tuned for that. So thank you to Entrepreneur and Entrepreneur Press. So without further ado, I want to jump right in because we have a lot to cover today. It's a big topic, very, very intriguing to me, and I think it's going to be intriguing to you guys out there in the audience. So I want to introduce and welcome to the show, Carmen Williams, the CEO and founder of DayEDigital. How are you doing today, Carmen?
Good, thank you. How are you? Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to have you. So tell us a little bit about, your consultancy, your business, your brand. How did you get to where you are today and what you're doing?
Yes, sounds good. Well, gosh, I started in the advertising agency about 32 years ago, funnily enough, during a recession in Vancouver, Canada, actually. And I guess I've been blessed and maybe cursed over the last 32 years. I've probably had about 20 different jobs. And so I have had to just naturally become very adaptive. And at the time COVID hit, I lost my job and I decided to head into consulting. And I started my own agency. And I was very blessed that about a year ago, I got introduced to a very cool organization called the Unisys.org. And they are the folks that discovered the science around evolution and how that applies to every adaptive environment. And so my consultancy is using that evolutionary approach to help my clients grow their business through marketing strategies. So that's what I'll talk about today.
Yeah. Well, and I tell you, that's what you just framed. I think the frame is the important thing, right? Is something that I hope the listeners are tuning in, right? The frame is adaptive. The frame is change. It's not like it was. We're going into a perpetual change environment, and it's a good thing, or it could be a hard thing to deal with. And that's really what your frameworks and your approaches deal with is that. So tell me a little bit more about how, we're obviously with COVID-19, it's end of 2020, we're heading into the new year, we're excited about that. But tell us a little bit about how you see, you approaching business and growth within enterprises or multi-location businesses like franchises. What do you think is the one key thing that you're focused on to help them grow?
Well, let me just start with telling you that you may or may not have kind of picked up on the fact that the pace of change is really increasing. So even like I think about my 32 years of being in marketing, just the amount of change and how fast things are changing, it's continuing in that way. So you just need to be aware of that, first of all. So let's talk about change and evolution. So first of all, every living entity is an adaptive environment. And every adaptive environment is based on the science of evolution. The same rules apply to every living entity. So you and I, our businesses, our company, the economy, the world, the universe, everything that's a living entity is an adaptive environment. And in fact, the science of evolution applies to that. So that's the great part about it, is understanding that framework, the science that you can use to influence your own adaptive environment, as well as your customers' adaptive environment, your employees, etc. So change is kind of part of life. And the sooner you embrace that, the sooner you realize that that's the fun part, that's the exciting part. And if you can influence that to your benefit, then it gets to be really fun. So we're going to talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about change, I hear a lot about exponential growth, right? The 2-4-16 kind of idea, not the linear growth, right? That we were having. And I know that, the way I view it is that, the speed of change can obviously be very disruptive and discouraging to some that aren't used to it. But how do you take this idea that computing power is changing, data is in abundance and being produced every day, helping computers be smarter, right? That's sort of the premise of AI. How do you take that idea, though, that seems so foreign and so new and almost like sci-fi, and take that into something where you can sit down with a client and work through it and help them? Like, what does that first step look like when you help someone?
Well, so first of all, let me talk a little bit about AI, because traditional, or sort of that, first of all, AI is a pretty broad concept that kind of picks up a bunch of different principles, but math-based artificial intelligence is looking at past data and using that past data sequencing to predict the future. Well, actually, there's something that's missing in that, and that's the fundamentals AI around evolutionary science. And so what that all is based on is that living entity has a concept, and then has a growth strategy and a minimal strategy for survival. And so I know this sounds a little crazy, but that's kind of what I talk to my clients about. And I help bring sort of like, I guess, common language to that and help develop strategies using that thinking. So every single relationship, right? Your relationship with your customers, your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your employees has the same rules in order for that relationship to grow. And so that's really understanding that strategy and working with my clients to develop the best growth strategies based on that. Combining it with AI. So the whole technology and the growth of that is, I mean, that's happening. You need to embrace it. It's not, it's something that I'm not necessarily a technology consultant. So, but how to apply it and how to use it as part of your overall strategy is the key.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, yeah, I just think about, so technology, it is still more about humans becoming better humans, right? And companies still becoming more human, actually, right? Not less human. And so hopefully and it sounds like you're teaching sort of those ideas that would help them be more human, but still leverage advanced technology, right? For what makes sense for them. But tell us a little bit about like COVID-19 and how does that impact when you're sitting down with folks? Is it that what you're talking to them about would have been the ideal recipe anyway? I mean, for that type of situation to occur, is it just, it happened to be that happened, or do you adapt yourself? I mean, you anything because of it, or is it sort of just, you really need this now? Like, you know what I mean? Kind of like,
well, the thing is that the whole world is an adaptive environment, and the COVID pandemic affected that adaptive environment, and we sort of stepped back. It was like we contracted. So the world has contracted. It's called a counter cycle period. It's like recession, right? So for our economy anyway. So that's something that just happened. Like as an individual person or company, you don't control that. What you need to do is adapt to that and take advantage of that, and understanding where there's growth opportunities and what you need to do to survive. So does it make sense? I don't know if did that answer your question?
Well, no, I mean, absolutely does. I mean, I think that's the point, right? Is that the change was already here. COVID introduced a sort of maybe accelerated certain awareness or changed certain things, but the perpetual.
Right. So let me explain, like, if you just kind of think about it, in some ways, a lot of things slowed down. Like we're not commuting, we're working from home, our kids are doing school from home, we're spending more time with them. So there's some aspects where like things got to slow down, but in other aspects like digital learning, working from home, e-commerce, everything sort of digital accelerated. So does it make sense? Like not everything is the same equation, but it's understanding how the adaptive environment is working, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does. So tell us a little bit about like, if you have a specific story or you just, or maybe a project you're working on where, you can give us an example of how a company may be dealing with this change, right? Using some of these principles you're talking about, then applying them to dealing with not just, what we're saying overall, the technological change that's a driver, but the COVID as well. Do you have any stories or specific ideas that you could share with the audience?
Well, I think all of the clients that I've worked with and worked on are, that is the key sort of success criteria for them as they're adapting and growing is this mindset. It's called adaptive marketing or agile marketing, where you are is sort of like a strategy of evaluating, sort of throwing your strategy out there, testing and reflecting, and then adapting to that. So that sort of evolutionary approach, adaptive marketing, agile marketing, that's kind of the mindset that most of my clients, we talk about and we put into place. Because if you think about evolution is change. Change is, doing something different, altering and adapting. Adapting is making something suitable for a new purpose. So that mindset has really been the secret ingredient and criteria. And so Zenoti, for example, when I was working with them full time, we were all about increasing the volume of guests going through the salon. Well, you can be sure that's not the how we're looking at things now, right? So now it's about that exemplary service, because that people are coming in fewer times, but they're spending more, so they want that better service. So it's just kind of shifting. I don't know if that was a good enough example. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's exactly what we've shared with many of our guests and heard back from them. And over these last, 10 months now, however long it's been since we've been going through this evolution. But a lot of people are talking about, look, you're still in the same business. The emphasis is different. You're still providing value. The way you're going about providing that value is adapting or evolving, right?
That's right.
But, like you said, in some cases, it's that you're going to see customers fewer times, or you're doing it virtually, or you're doing a service differently. So the way in which you provide that and do that, and we talked a lot about, just communicating safety and communicating a safe environment to do business and acknowledging things, right?
Yeah.
To your audience, whatever your audience is, and it's every audience is a little different, but that idea, right, is that you're still doing it, but you're adapting the way or how you're doing it.
And one of the things you said that I wanted to kind of expand on a little bit is you talked a little bit about, I think, using technology for good. Yeah. So one of the things about understanding an evolutionary approach is that everybody has a concept at their core. And so if you think about a company, and what's that company's true concept at their core, and what are the ethics that drive it? And that is really going to be so important in the future, because the consumer really cares more and more about how ethical is the company. And so that, I think, is going to be a key ingredient for growth and for success, is having a strategy that's, obviously a maximal strategy for growing, minimal strategy for survival, but that it has a inviting ethical concept at the core. Did that make sense? Yeah, and so technology, how that weaves back to using technology is, because technology is there, it can be used, potentially for bad reasons, but really the companies that use it for good, I think will see the success. There will be a payoff for that approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's, well, and I think that whether you're, not everybody has the benefit or advantage of being in a business that is, if you're saving lives, then that's one thing. And if you're selling a product that's just sort of like keeping the lights on, I still think there's room to say we do business ethically, we do business responsibly.
Yes,
we're efficient. We're treating our employees well, the community around us, right? So even if you're in a sort of a utility or a business that doesn't really make a direct impact, right? You could say the iPhone changed the world, and maybe it's good, right? Maybe not, but it was quite an impact, right? For people that work at Apple, have a common view of impacting the world with their products, right? So some people have that. Some people have, it's a product that no one really cares about, right? But it's still, for your audience, for who you're working with, it's still important to have that strategy. And that you're right, because the technology and how it's used is more about what makes sense for that company, right? It's just how do we, but the company has to have a rooted foundational vision that is communicating what you're saying, Right? Is that my hearing? Am I getting that? Because I think that's the core thing. So we're going back, like I said earlier, almost to being more human, right? But using the technology to be
Yes, that is exactly right. So I think you hit it exactly. That,
Okay.
yep, the human aspect. Yep, you got it.
All right, good deal. We solved the world. We solved all the problems on our radio show here today.
Yeah. So I think, again, just back to leadership. So owning a franchise or series of franchises and being a leader and how to navigate the future and how to grow, right? And so another sort of three key components to leadership that are correlate to success. And so I just talked about that conceptual intelligence, so that the ethics piece of it and having a high level of conceptual intelligence. The next thing is sort of that strategic intelligence, and that obviously makes sense, understanding your business, having strategic frameworks for growth, et cetera. And then there's the emotional intelligence. I know you've heard a lot about, it's kind of quite in the media a lot these days, but it is also a really key component. And so your interpersonal empathy, all of these components to emotional intelligence. So those are if you think about it, if you care enough to kind of dig into those topics, those are the main key contributors to success. And so, like I said, that adaptable mindset is part of all of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not that it's particularly hard to understand these ideas. It's that they're so radically different than what we're used to. And then you've got just sort of, I think a lot of buzz and a little bit of hype that goes around with things. And then people don't have a true idea or clear picture of what exactly they should be focused on. And hopefully you and I can help make the world a better place from a marketing standpoint, right? With how we do it.
And then speaking of focus, so you keep reminding me of some key things, so how to navigate and move forward. So really, again, and I think I said this, but I'm going to repeat it just a little bit slower to just make sure that it had impact today, is that if you sort of have a clear concept and strategy, and then you're testing and reflecting, and then you're adapting and changing. So those are kind of the three steps. And it's a constant. So if you think about the pace of change, 5 years ago, you'd develop an annual plan, you'd maybe revisit it once a quarter. So right now, well, of course, in the middle of COVID, is probably once a week. And maybe as things settle down a little bit going forward, it'll be a little bit longer in between, but really that short-paced, constant evaluation and adapting is sort of the approach forward. Yeah. And that helps you, right? So you're like, I'm not exactly sure where to focus, where it helps you to kind of get that clear focus, because you start off with your concept, and if that's clear, then you're able to kind of adjust and pivot and keep moving towards the right direction, if that makes sense.
No, totally. Start with the end in mind is the first thing I just thought when you said that. But having that clear concept right in the beginning is so key. And then, your idea of testing, optimizing, and then adapting. It reminds me of digital marketing, right?
Yes.
Right? It's real-time information, always evolving, right? And having a framework to do that and make it better and better. So, well, that's awesome. So, we're coming close to the end of our time together here on today's show. And the way I like to wrap up a lot of shows is just kind of leaving the audience with, if there's a key principle, and you hit so many, I think what you just said was key. But is there anything, especially over these last 10 months with this new development of COVID and doing what you already do? And I mean, is there any key principle or idea you'd want to leave with the audience? You just think keep that one thing in mind, or maybe just emphasize what you've been saying?
Well, yeah, I definitely think the adaptability, but, ethics, right? So you just think about the United States and the political environment we were in, and just where we landed, and just keeping in mind that caring about people. I think that, you touched on the human aspect, and I just think you can't go wrong, right? If at the end of the day, your ethics are strong and you care about people, that's kind of where I think you land. That's the success.
Right. And I heard that you triggered something in my mind as you were sharing that. And it's sort of I forget, I was watching a TED Talk, I believe, but the statement was this. It was support AI. It's talking about AI and technology and change. But it should be, you talked about ethics, what you just said, but the idea of technology should support human goals, but be constrained by human values.
Yes.
And
yes.
You see what I mean? And I think that's the fear right now. If anyone who understands the technology, these algorithms kind of think for themselves. They're learning and getting better, but the getting better is sort of this arbitrary thing that's not really constrained by human values. So we're working on that. But I think that was a key point. Like it's making us become, as we said earlier, more human. You know what I mean? Still, we have more of our values in there, but we're using technology to do greater things and help each other more. So,
yep, I completely agree, and it's a fun. So embrace change. It's here to stay, and move forward and grow.
Well, that sounds great. Well, Carmen, I really appreciate you taking some time with us today. I know that our audience will definitely get a lot out of this. I mean, if they just get some of these key points, right? Start thinking about it and looking for help around you, looking for consultants, smart people like Carmen. But guess what? Carmen, why don't you share with the audience how they can get a hold of you and a little bit of, again, the best way to get in touch if they feel like they have a need to kind of just look at this and figure out, how do I move forward?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Reach out anytime. It's Carmen at DayEDigital.com. So DayEDigital.com. So yeah, I look forward to speaking with any of you.
All right. Excellent. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for being here. That'll do it for this week's edition of Franchise Bible Coach Radio with Rick and Rob. Thanks again for listening, and bye for now.